Assassin's Creed Secret War is a concept for a present-day and issue-focused AC game taking place in a persistent, connected world using tech and design structures that Ubisoft are already good at using in their other games. This is an article written by Sorrosyss from Access the Animus, and it made quite a big impact on the AC subreddit a few weeks ago, and it's one that caught my attention. You know how much I love present day, you know how much I love cyberpunk, and even besides that, there are some interesting ideas on display here that have to do with gameplay, and seeing as I'm kind of a mechanics guy, they hit me pretty hard. There were a few moments that resonated with me, and I'll walk you through what those were and what I think about the ideas attached to them. Multiplayer gameplay, the modern-day setting, and the community are three unique aspects of the franchise that this design concept targets as its main focuses. This is really cool from the get-go, because these aspects of Assassin's Creed have been neglected. You could argue that the community is interacted with, and its members interact among each other, but you do have that air of Ubi very rarely acknowledging present-day screenshots, ideas, desires, and the fanbase doesn't tend to want to talk about present-day so much these days. I think this is in part because of how much conflict and tension surrounds this topic online, and how draining it has become to engage with it sometimes. I get that, it's very important to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I think we should remember it's fine to talk about something we enjoy, and it doesn't always have to be something that makes us feel so tense. I'm gonna try to appreciate present day in visible ways a bit more these days, try not to feel so tense about it all, and remembering what made me love it, because the reason I'm mentioning this conversational tension is a lot of that can be broken by giving us more content to talk about. This is especially true if that's playable content that many community members can share information, ideas, and thoughts on. If you don't have that much stuff to talk about, the little that's remaining is going to get played out very quickly. And at that point, it becomes kind of difficult to talk about new things and new ideas instead of feeling like you're repeating yourself all the time. She makes sure to preface and clarify that this isn't looking to replace the core AC games we know and love, and this actually gave me a bit of a laugh because I love how she had to do this, otherwise a bunch of present-day fans who were worried would have blown her up for it. The main games are the main games. Fair is fair, I'm 100% there for that. Some people still won't super dig this idea at first, but hopefully this video will show you why I'm not too afraid of these possibilities, and why I think they can be pretty cool. Along with affirming that this would be an addition to the good stuff we already have, and a place to refocus the transmedia content instead of scattering it throughout a billion comic books, I like that we're hit with the chance to play this between main releases. This is a great point and something I hadn't thought about, but something that a lot of people do think about when we're waiting for new AC content. This is the question on everyone's minds when we hear news or rumors that a new AC won't be coming in the next year. Inevitably, some people will wonder if they might prefer to get AC gameplay each year. This is understandable, it makes sense. For a lot of people, Assassin's Creed helps them contextualize their year's rhythm with regard to gaming or even in general. It's something that for quite a while we learned we could count on, and there's still a kind of wonder about picking up each year's AC game and seeing what's up inside its simulations, as long as they're good enough. And the flip side to all this is that sometimes they're not good enough. Sometimes Assassin's Creed needs more time to deliver us a fresher experience, or to prevent people from burning out. What do we do in those moments? Replay some of the old ones? Discuss story with people on forums? Discuss mechanics, game design? Toss around ideas for how we can fix things? Sure, that can be pretty great, and it often is, but it's not really more gameplay. Well, this concept fixes that. This can give Ubi that extra dev time they sometimes need. It's a handy buffer that helps with the constant grind of pumping out games, sometimes before they're ready. Ubi's other franchises have been quite good about having a long lifetime and sustaining enjoyment even during the so-called dry season. With an experience like this, we could always log in and have a bit of something fun to do, due to the variety of gameplay types it offers, and I'll get to those in a bit. But first, let's look at the precedents for this kind of experience being possible, or at least the precedents for Ubisoft thinking in this direction. This stuff right here is unbelievable. We straight up have all the receipts. multiplayer has been a part of the Assassin's Creed franchise in some form almost since the beginning. Even AC1 was originally conceptualized as being a cooperative multiplayer game. There's something about the Assassin's Creed universe that makes the idea of working with or against other players appealing and interesting, and the way Ubisoft integrates multiplayer in AC fascinates me, because it's often got its own lore, its own story. It's not just an arbitrary mode tossed into a video game for the sake of it. It's got its own purpose and goals that are distinct from the main campaigns, both mechanically and narratively. What distinguishes AC multiplayer from the multiplayer of other conventionally single-player games out there is that it's actually a valuable part of the AC universe. It's not a waste of time to enjoy it the way it might usually feel when tacked onto any other huge story-driven game, with a few exceptions like GTA Online as one example, which does it pretty well. This part of the article made me laugh because the research has clearly been done here and been quite thorough. It's this cheeky examination of the history of multiplayer in the AC franchise using quotes and hard sources from the devs themselves. The effort expended to make these receipts practically bulletproof is goddamn hilarious to me, and I love that subtle audacity, as if daring someone to dispute it because you know someone will want to. Anyway, beyond that, one thing I found fun is that it taught me something I didn't know yet, which is Assassin's Creed Online Alliance. It was a potential multiplayer AC game that would allow players to create an assassin or Templar character and engage in PvP elements. I think this is interesting and a critical part of the article because it leads into the next part. This is a big thing that I'm sure will relieve a lot of this article's readers. I think we can all agree that an AC MMO would be pretty silly, for the reasons the article lists, like visible player counts, performance on consoles, and control issues. It would be untenable. Yes, Secret War does aim at a live, shared world experience, but as we can read here, the idea is for it to retain the core gameplay and expand it. Similar in scope to something like GTA Online and Destiny, leaning more toward GTA in my mind, in terms of execution, but all of it attached to a powerful universe and brand like Assassin's Creed. This kind of multiplayer experience could be even stronger than something like an MMO if done right, and part of that power for me comes from you being able to go at it solo for much of the content, to immerse yourself in that world, in those environments and objectives, do all those quests even if you don't always have a full party of friends to play with, and if you really wanted to, matchmaking would probably take care of that part anyway. So there's a nice screenshot mockup here by BrunoHM that I'll go over quickly. The prime setting of Secret War is present day, which immediately makes the happy chemicals in my brain go into overdrive. Like, look at this is so cool. I'm guessing some of these HUD elements are stealth, whether you're anonymous or not, potentially ammo, a health bar, maybe a red threat ring showing there are hostiles in that direction. Like maybe you have to use eagle vision to find them, I don't know, but there's lots of cool possibilities. Moving on to some of the stuff I really liked in the text, depending on which cities of the world we might experience the modern day setting, the use and carrying of firearms might be illegal. With the two secretive factions not looking to draw attention to themselves in modern camera surveillance, the focus on social stealth would be massive. Concealed weaponry would mean a strong return for the hidden blade and ensure that the game focuses strongly on melee combat. This in turn would help distinguish itself from the myriad of shooting games already on the market. This is awesome. Some of this stuff is what I would even want from the historical gameplay of an AC game, let alone in present day where it gets even cooler and accentuates the differences between Assassin's Creed and other games. Showing off what makes it have that unique vibe. When people say that firearms would be a huge crutch for the player in a present day AC game, I think many of them miss that not so many countries in the world allow citizens to open carry guns, and lots of the ones that do involve some pretty rigorous testing to allow someone to do so. Let's not forget, the entire planet isn't America, and setting a present-day Assassin's Creed game out of the USA is in many ways more likely than not. In terms of character creation, it comes with some strengths, especially for a game like this. Different people relate to different characters, and letting us create one puts that power in the player's hands. Having a player-created character makes more sense for a persistent experience that takes place in present day. And one reason is that most players would accept this much more easily than having character creation for the historical layer, because there's a lot of questions of, how would you justify that, etc. This has a nice side effect of allowing all players to make the kind of character they can most easily resonate with. then dress them up in a badass cloak and hood anyway, because come on, right? This is especially useful for a game that would be returning to time and time again over several months and years, and in a game played over a long time window, you're going to want players to be embodying a character that resonates with their identity and playstyle as much as possible, so this could be quite good. Every player would need to connect through the Helix servers, and through the bleeding effect people would develop the abilities of the experience they're having through a tutorial. In doing so, they would attract the attention of some infamous entities. This gave me chills when I first read it, and is pretty much exactly how I would want the story to go. I wrote a pretty bad fanfiction one time where that happened to me, so it's like the writer went into my head and basically gave me my favorite idea. Now I read both of these, and screw these guys over here, because these guys here are so much cooler, but I don't know, maybe I'm biased. The factions could have minor differences cosmetically to help them be distinct. For example, assassins only having access to hoods and hidden blades, and Templars having face masks and knives. Because if you make them too different, for example giving Templars better ranged weapons, then you open up a range of balancing issues that it would be easier to simply avoid. This makes huge sense to me. I like this a lot because every player should have access to all the gameplay. You shouldn't get a lesser experience because you're playing one faction over the other. I like how it explains why Templars might be appealing to play, because certain recent efforts even seem noble to some players, like Otto Berg, who took it upon himself to become the present-day Black Cross and keep Abstergo in check. Making it appealing to play both factions also gives players a small incentive to make ults, which is nice if you finish or have your fill of the existing content as your main character. It can also be fun to experience whatever story and missions we can play in Secret War from the perspective of both sides as a way of enriching the narrative. Secret War would have Animus settings as well, because it's in the fusion of past and present that Assassin's Creed is powerful. Just as present day would not likely be stripped completely from the main entries, so too would Animus simulations remain in Secret War. Besides, the Animus is cyberpunk as hell, and you don't really get to see that unless you actually use one in sync with the past. Players would have the choice of visiting various memories of time frames and locations within their Animus, with Ubisoft to add new maps over time. In the interests of speeding up development time, they could repurpose the cities or maps of previous games and add new ones over time. This is pretty smart. Restructure them to work for multiplayer and they basically become like quests or quest chains. Only instead of going to different regions of Azeroth or Tyria or whatever, you would go into different Animus settings and undergo a sequence of memories there. That, and these worlds would likely not be super massive and just reasonably sized to give you enough room to move around. I kind of consider the Afterlives from Curse of the Pharaohs to be comparable to this, but that's just kind of my thoughts for a scaled initial release. In the interests of honesty, I had to leave a previous version of this video unreleased because the language I used to express my love for this here was perhaps a little bit inappropriate, but moving on. As the franchise's primary antagonist, Juno is a common enemy to both of the factions. This is pretty smart, true, and it makes sense. Why kill her permanently, especially now? Keeping her active as a way to give the Assassins and Templars a cause to unite against would be an amazing narrative justification for why we're able to play as both factions and both help and hinder each other. As players are constantly in contact with the Grey, there is the potential for Juno to attack players, perhaps by using rifts or outright disrupting simulations to imperil you with environmental hazards or simply destroying the world around you. Can you imagine fighting this girl? Try that on Legendary and then come back to tell me how tough Overwatch Retribution was. The Instruments of the First Will. Considering who wrote this game concept, literally nobody should be shocked it would be possible to join the Instruments of the First Will, and I'd be lying if I said playing around with their tools and gadgets wouldn't be super appealing. I also like the idea that the option to join them isn't present from the beginning. Players are asked to choose between Assassin and Templar to keep things simple at the start, and then later on they can choose to sort of class up into being an instrument if they wish. This is a mechanical way to show a narrative characteristic, which I always like. The narrative trait in question here is that pretty much all instruments who narratively significant are defectors from one of the two major factions, and rarely do they ever start out as one. Having the gameplay reflect this would feel very appropriate, and I like that. The incentive to play as different factions and get story elements from different perspectives also applies here. Desmond and Clay are still hinted at being active in the Grey as of Unity's Assassin Intel files, like this article reminds us, and it would be cool to see them appear to players at various times, to either warn them of stuff or be unique skill trainers or something like that. With the Watch Dogs franchise also set in the modern day, there is the potential for crossover elements there too. Perhaps DedSec and Bloom could also make an appearance in our modern day element. If UB really wanted to do this, and to unite their worlds for short bursts of time, it would be pretty cool. You could do it the way Overwatch does its timed PvE events now. Every once in a while, a special story event with unique game types comes to the game. Players interact with these characters, and then at the end of the time window during which it's active, it disappears again to make sure players focus back on Assassins and Templars and Juno, which are the core of the game. The more recent Assassin's Creed games have tried out character building and loot elements that would work well in a persistent online setting, maybe even better than they would work in a focused single-player experience. The lessons learned from a game like Origins can very much be applied to a shared world game like Secret War to receive some pretty substantial benefits. One thing I like is that the article moves on to mention 3 different avenues of progression, and I like it because having more than one is generally good game design, good progression design. What this lets you do is diversify a player's rewards and diversify the actions necessary to get those rewards. There's something to be said for the adamant focus of the Soulsborne franchise for only having one type of currency, but even those games allow you to make the choice between injecting that into your character or into gear and items to equip them with. XP progression and scaling, gear progression, and faction progression are all different channels of character growth that Secret War would offer. I don't have much to say about these beyond the general thought that the diversity is good and allows players different targets to aim for if they get bored of one type or begin to find it too difficult. If gearing is too tough at the moment because of high-level content, going for XP and skilling can let you unlock some extra player verbs or gain greater statistics with which to try again. Good stuff. The party size of 4 used by Unity seems ideal. It also added specializations such as melee, ranged, stealth, etc., which are very much equivalent to class archetypes seen in many MMORPGs. I feel this system would work well in a persistent world where everyone could have a set role within teams. I agree, a party size of 4 is nice and manageable both on the dev side and on the player side. Everyone kind of expects 4-player teams as a standard thing across a lot of co-op games nowadays anyway, so it would be a natural transition. The class archetypes like Warrior, Ranger, Rogue are definitely an appeal for some people, and hackers could be mages since Rebecca and Layla are both hacker archetypes that are skilled at using the technology around them in clever ways. Full-on assassination missions could be generated where you need to work together to eliminate a target. Hell yeah. Actually, we never had these. In co-op, it was never really, take out this one massive Templar target, it was more, take out this one random guy who doesn't mean much to anyone and he's not even that well guarded. The rest of the text goes on to talk about high-level activities incentivizing teamwork, which is always a positive feature for a game's lifetime. See, there are always going to be some players who play games for this reason, the thrill of teaming up with allies and each feeling like they're contributing something important to the success of everyone else. This kind of gameplay can also be really good at building or strengthening emotional bonds between players, which I've recently had more experience with myself given Overwatch. I never expected to enjoy this kind of feeling before, as even when I played MMOs back in the day, I was very often a solo player and never really felt like I belonged anywhere. Not every player is going to enjoy this kind of group-centered or endgame content, but I think it's still important to have it in the game because it doesn't make sense to remove something that some players would love simply because others wouldn't care for it. Which is really kind of similar to my overall feelings on present day in general, now that I think about it. Interesting. PvP. I can tell you I'd probably be playing the hell out of this. I've told this story on the subreddit once before, but the day Brotherhood came out, I was 17, which meant I was not legally allowed to purchase the game here. There was a Blockbuster, RIP, near my high school, and I went there with 2 of my best friends to buy AC Brotherhood. Cashier was like, "You over 18? I was like, "Yep," without missing a beat. She didn't even check anything, she just sold it to me. Social stealth too strong. Then we went back to my buddy's house, which was across the street from the school, and lunchtime was 1 hour, right? So 2 of us would be eating while the third guy would play matches on this old CRT television. It was unbelievable. PvP in Assassin's Creed? Madness. The stealth, the subtlety required. We learned how annoying hidden gun was, and then we learned that if you don't sprint everywhere, they can't lock you for it because they don't know who you are. We learned how useful smoke was to escape a chase, and how thrilling the active chase is, something that doesn't exist in Assassin's Creed anymore, really was. As intense as it felt in AC1, and maybe even more, since now you were hunting and being hunted by real people. It's kind of wild that the first thing I did was to play the multiplayer until I got so antsy to play the story that I couldn't take it anymore. But it was super neat. I'd love to see that come back. Probably no trophies attached to ridiculous parameters like ultra mega badass epic kill variety in the same match or anything crazy like that, but otherwise intact. It was just wild, man. That was one of my favorite memories. And Dan, Free, if you're watching this vid, those were some good times. Mortal Kombat 9 at lunchtimes was also great fun, and I miss you guys. Now, one of the mission types here really caught my eye, and it's kill a target. Both teams have to breach a fort. The first to defeat the guards and eliminate its leader wins. PvPvE. I like this a lot because it's something I haven't experienced myself in too many games, and definitely not in Assassin's Creed. During the standard multiplayer modes of the past games, there weren't any NPCs you could kill for a bonus or a score boost. Things like that only happen in modes like Wolfpack, but never in the actual PvP. Allowing players to play around an objective is something that clever multiplayer games do in order to make sure players actually engage each other instead of just chilling in one corner of the map and never seeing any action. Involving objectives or specific pieces of a map like a payload, an assassination target, or a treasure makes sure games constantly have a sense of flow and that all players have a reasonably high chance of fighting each other over the course of a match. This is a really good idea, and this game mode is what I'd try first in Secret War. The article has a section on what kind of considerations we should make involving the community. Companion apps, external methods of engagement with the game world. This is an important topic to cover because there are ways to do this very, very wrong, and nobody wants that. Conversely, there are also ways to execute this that can be wickedly satisfying, so it's good that it's mentioned here. The franchise previously tried to enroll the fanbase to live in the game world with the Initiates project that ran until 2015. It was highly popular among the hardcore fans as the level of lore immersion it allowed was truly memorable. We now need to take this principle a step further and take a leap of faith into a living game world. Ubisoft already has the platform and technology it needs to make an online persistent world a reality. It's already done so with The Division after all, and it also has Ubisoft Club, which covers all gaming platforms and tracks stats and progress from the franchise's past. This could in turn benefit players going forwards, as well as allowing for the social integration aspects of the game. Setting everything in present day would ultimately allow us to use mobile phones and tablets to experience this universe outside of the game. This is cool, because the thing about companion apps is, the only reason people hate them and the only time people hate them is when they feel mandatory. When content you paid your money to access is locked behind this weaker, less polished experience that's not running on our high-powered console or computer, it basically feels like an insult. However, when they're not really necessary but a genuine supplement that can boost or enhance the experience, without really giving you anything you can't get in the main game, they're never a problem, so this is actually great. We would be able to communicate in the real world with other faction members via the app. We could also perhaps complete many puzzles on our phone that reward aid for our faction, or even give XP to our account for those times when you're stuck at work or college. That would be really nice. You could still play, you could still contribute, and it would feel more like you're part of the world. Using social media could also cheaply advertise the Secret War and incentivize more players to join the online ranks. You could even expand the storyline by letting us track down and interact with characters from within the game world over these websites. Imagine an Ottoberg Twitter account. Read my goddamn mind, that would be super sick. It would allow players to share their passion with their friends, as well as give Ubisoft their own advertising and promotion for the online component. I read deeper into this than what's actually on the page, once again influenced by Overwatch, but in my eyes this sentence has an invisible final part that goes, even if they don't necessarily play the game themselves. See, a huge number of people watch the Overwatch animated shorts on YouTube and read the lore and consume artwork, stories, and conversations surrounding its characters and narrative without actually playing the game. And in addition to just being a nice thing for players to enjoy, this acts as organic marketing, potentially drawing more players in. A great quote I once heard is that multiplayer games are cost-effective because they turn players into content for the other players who are in the game with them to play against or beside. I didn't get Overwatch because I saw a trailer or a character I liked. I didn't get Overwatch because I was stoked for the idea of a hero shooter. I actually assumed that I would hate this game. So why did I start it at all? I got Overwatch because I wanted to play it with someone important to me, someone I care about who already had the game. Eventually I discovered characters that I fell in love with through this process, but what sold me on it was that sense of togetherness and community. Assassin's Creed Secret War can benefit immensely from this approach. There are a few key bullet points to make about how development would work here. Ubisoft has main studios and supplementary studios. It's not quite how it works all the time, but this is a decent way to think of it. Montreal as main could be responsible for the present day sections, the most important and biggest parts of the content. The secondary studios like Annecy, Toronto, and Sofia would watch over building maps and time periods, be they DLCs or expansions, and these would be added over time. The suggestion the article makes is that whenever a mainline AC game is released, the other Ubisoft studios could be given its location and character assets to repurpose them for use in Secret War, where they might not appear in exactly the same ways, but in whatever ways best fit this connected experience. This is both to keep them feeling fresh and to suit the multiplayer element that a solo-focused game could not sustain without alteration. Since play areas for Secret War could be built faster than main narrative sequels, players could get content faster, once again making this a place to hang out between main releases. Since microtransactions aren't super popular, expansions would be chargeable, purchasable content that players decide to invest in or not. Certain parts, like the main present-day open world, would be accessible to everyone, so the player base is not split and divided so harshly, while allowing everyone to decide what level of investment they wish for themselves when it comes to the anima settings and the extra content. At a certain point, microtransactions will probably become an inevitability because this is a live game that has server costs, constant patching, and other such maintenance expenditures to consider, but at this point the article kind of blew me away because it makes a very strong point. People would already be spending money on comics and external media which aren't even playable to experience the present-day story now. These costs would just be fed back into this actual interactive experience that we could live within and play. And at the end of the day, if I had to pick between experiencing present day in a game, getting myself into and out of situations with people who've got my back, or experiencing that by myself in a comic where I feel all that's it as soon as the issue is over, I would much rather take the bonds and camaraderie and the power of digital games over reading a comic any day. Finally, the last notable thing about the development section is that it suggests an amount of dev power could be given to players, giving us the kinds of tools for creating content that Far Cry 5 and GTA Online afford their players could allow us to extend the lifetime of Secret War by taking matters into our own hands as well. There are a few things suggested here, but parkour challenges and creating our own black box assassinations really stand out to me, and I feel very understood and loved right now. Thank you. Having spent so many years within the Assassin's Creed universe, it now seems fitting for us all to come together and make our own customized stories within the franchise. With your own character vested into the series, you would no longer have to say goodbye to the main hero each time, and instead look forward to future adventures in your own storyline, as well as being able to play alongside your friends. The beauty of this is that new players could comfortably catch up with the story at their own pace without having to purchase previous titles or very transmedia stories. It would all be contained here, with each patch extending the story into the future. Once again, I love how this solves a relevant problem in the Assassin's Creed franchise and the community surrounding it. Centralizing the present-day narrative like this is immensely helpful to players who adamantly hate present day, because there'd probably be less of it in the main games, and to players who adore present day in the ISU, because this gives those elements a place where they can really shine as the prime focus. This proposal in no way looks to replace the excellent single-player narrative releases, but I firmly believe the franchise is strong enough to support a multiplayer spin-off title, especially one primarily set in the fanbase popular modern-day setting of the franchise. Ubisoft is clearly leaning towards the living world path for their future titles. It was previously speculated that The Division and For Honor were technical test beds for future Assassin's Creed games, and I suppose there is some evidence pointing towards that. For Honor runs on Anvil Next, for example, with 44 PvP. As the flagship title for Ubisoft though, Assassin's Creed is now conspicuously absent from the living worlds that Ubisoft's IP catalog offers, and the true live game service model of the future. I can't help but feel that it needs to get on board the bandwagon. In some ways, this also benefits players who don't want live game frameworks in the main AC games, which many people will appreciate. There's a lot of things that become uncomfortable in a focused single-player game that are more acceptable in a connected, persistent multiplayer environment, and I think that Assassin's Creed making that internal distinction could be very strong. The article caps off with, "This concept would ultimately give a new home for both the modern day and multiplayer, and combined with the creativity of the community, I feel this is a concept that would be of interest to existing and new fans. It's time for Assassin's Creed to bring back and rebirth some of its most popular features, and for all of us to join in and be a literal part of its narrative future. And for a community that has always come together to keep the fire in our hearts, the love of present day alive, this will be no different from what we do every other day. Only this time, all our work, our effort, and the hope for what Assassin's Creed can be would really, truly mean something."